For this project, I'm going to show you how to create a YouTube thumbnail for any videos that you might want to use on YouTube. Now, you can use this process to make all kinds of different thumbnails. It doesn't have to be YouTube specific. This might be something for Facebook or Twitter or even a blog or anywhere else where you would want to use this type of image to grab attention. Now, of course, there's a lot of different types of thumbnails on YouTube, so I won't be covering all of them, but I'll show you one that's pretty common. People seem to like it and use it a lot, and it's because it uses nice bold text and really just kinds of draws you in and grabs your attention right from the beginning. So the first thing that you want to do is head over to YouTube's help desk, and I just did a search for thumbnails, and we want to look at the requirements for the thumbnail on YouTube because it's important that we kind of follow their guidelines, so when we create this, we're using the right resolution and dimensions and so forth so that it uploads nicely and looks good on YouTube. So if we scroll down here, we see add video thumbnails, and if we go to the custom thumbnail best practices, there's image size and resolution. We'll click on that drop down box, and then it's going to tell us the information that we need to know when creating this image. So it says your custom thumbnail should be as large as possible, as the image will also be used as a preview image in the embedded player. We recommend your custom thumbnail have a resolution of 1280 by 720 with a minimum width of 640 pixels. Uploaded in image formats such as JPG, GIF, BMP, or PNG, remain under the 2 megabyte limit and use a 16 by 9 aspect ratio as it's most used in YouTube players and previews. So I'll just go through these real quick. The first one is the resolution. This is how many pixels wide and high your image needs to be. Now, it does say that you can use the highest image size as possible, but it also wants you to keep the size of the actual file under 2 megabytes. And the reason for that is because YouTube is displaying a lot of these at one time, and they want to load those images quickly, so they want a small file size. So you could use a different resolution, like say 1920 by 1080, which is a common 16 by 9 HD resolution. That will work, but just keep in mind the higher resolution you go up, the more you increase the file size, and you might run into an issue. So for this project, we'll just go ahead and use the recommended size of 1280 by 720. And then it says it can be uploaded in JPG, GIF, BMP, and PNG. Now, YouTube is big enough where it can really handle any of these okay. Some are used for different purposes than others. PNGs have transparent backgrounds, but we're not going to be dealing with transparent backgrounds. BMP are uncompressed files, but we're actually going to save it out as a JPG file. The JPG file is a compressed file, and it's going to keep the image looking really nicely, but it's going to help reduce the file size limit also. So we're going to use the recommended resolution, and we're going to pick the JPG compressed file size, try to keep it under the 2 megabyte limit, and then the 16 by 9 aspect ratio is already included in the 1280 by 720 resolution. This is just saying you don't want to use some strange aspect ratio like say 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. That would be a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. It would be a square, and that's not what we want. We want this HD 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and you will find that under 1280 by 720 or the one I mentioned before, 1920 by 1080. But for right now, let's just stick with this resolution. We'll export as a JPG file, and we will keep it under 2 megabytes. So let's go ahead and head over to Photoshop. So now we're in Photoshop, and we can begin working on this image. Now, you can go ahead and follow along with the image that I've provided here, or you can use any image that you would like. But I think it's important to go ahead and take note that starting with a very powerful image is really going to go a long way whenever you're creating any type of thumbnail. It doesn't matter if it's for YouTube or social media or anywhere else. If you can start with a good, captivating image at the beginning, then it makes your job a little easier. So this is just just a stock photo that I found online under the free Creative Commons license. And there's plenty of websites you can check out. Some of them are pexels.com, pixabay.com, unsplash.com. Flickr has a free Creative Commons area, and there's you can find a bunch of different photos that you can use online. But this is a great image because it has good composition, good lighting, it's very powerful, and the image stands on its own. So just sticking this image up into a thumbnail by itself would really pull the audience in. They would notice this image. You may be using an image of yourself, and if you're doing something like that, maybe you want to take a handful of images and pick the best one, or find an image like this. Now, like I said, there's different types of YouTube thumbnails that you can create. And so this is just one version that's kind of popular, but I'll show you how to create it now. So if you want to follow along with this image, go ahead and open up that image now. Now, if you go ahead and you look in the Document Properties panel, you will see that this is a very large image. It's almost 6,000 pixels by about 3,700 pixels, give or take. So it's a lot bigger than the resolution that we need for YouTube. Now, we could go ahead and trim down the canvas size and resize this, but I'm going to show you how to open this up into a new document. So if you ever want to move images or photos from one file to another file, I'll show you how to do that. So go up to the top and click on File, and then click on New, and that will bring up the new document window. And when this comes up, we can go ahead and put in our own custom dimensions. Now, let's just say that you have the default Photoshop size of 5 inches by, or 7 inches by 5 inches, 300 pixels per inch. We want to go ahead and change this on the right hand side. So the first thing that we can do is we can give this a name. So let's go ahead and name this now. And then we want to change the width and height. Now, we're not working in inches, we want to work in pixels. So go ahead and click on that drop down and then select pixels. And you can see the pixel dimensions are 2100 by 1500. Now, we could do a higher resolution like 1920 by 1080, which is 16 by 9 in high def, but we're going to stick with YouTube's recommended standards because we want to keep the file size small and we want to make sure that it loads really well, and so we need a smaller file size. So let's just go ahead and put in the recommended amounts of 1280 by 720. That's still a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And we're going to take the resolution down to 72 pixels per inch. 300 pixels per inch is great if you are working with print media, but anything online, you want to keep it a little lower, again, to reduce the file size. We can leave the color mode to RGB since we're working online, and we can leave it to 8-bit colors. Again, we want to keep the file size low, so we want to keep the amount of colors down. Now, the background contents, we're not really going to use a background. We're going to use the image as our background. You can make this whatever you would like, whatever feels comfortable. If you like starting white or starting black, if you grab this scroll bar over here and go down, you can actually make it transparent, which if you've used Photoshop in the past to create new documents, this might feel better for you too. So we'll just make it transparent and then hit the create button. Now that is going to go ahead and create the new document for us. And let's see, if we go to, okay, so I went to the Move tool and I just clicked out in the center, and you can see on the right hand side in the properties, it's 1280 pixels by 720 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. So this is the right size and resolution that YouTube requires, and this is what we're going to make our image in. It's created a layer called layer 1. It's not locked down, and because we see that checkerboard pattern, that is a transparent background. It basically means that there is nothing there. Not a checkerboard pattern, but absolutely nothing is there right now. But again, we're not going to use that, so that's of no concern. So now what we want to do is we want to move our image over into this document. First of all, let's go ahead and save this. I always like to save at the beginning, and then that way I can just hit a shortcut key to keep saving as I keep working. So go up to the top, go to File, and then Save is grayed out because we haven't made any changes and we haven't saved this yet. So go ahead and click the Save As button, and this will allow us to save it. Then make sure you go to the file that you would like to keep it in. It's going to bring in the name that we called it. So I called it YouTube thumbnail, and that's what it's going to be. And this is a PSD file. That way we can create layers and edit those layers later on. Whenever you have that ready to go, hit the save button in the bottom right hand corner. And then just go ahead and make sure maximize compatibility is turned on. I'm going to go ahead and click on don't show again so I don't have to view this anymore, and then hit OK. So that'll go ahead and save the document out for us. And as we begin making edits, we want to continually be saving. To do that, you can go to the top and you can go to File. And as you begin making edits, this will actually be highlighted so you can click on it. It's still grayed out because we haven't done anything to the document yet. But you can click on Save here, or you can hit the shortcut key Control S for Windows or Command S for Mac OS. And that's a shortcut key I'm going to be using as I save this document and as I begin making edits. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring the image over. You'll notice at the top that we have the adult blur business.jpg, that's the image of our camera, and then we have the YouTube thumbnail.psd file, which we're working on. And you can see we're zoomed in at 100%, so this is the actual size that this will create it in. If we zoom in, we'll be at 200%, and we can move around the workspace, and if we zoom out twice, we'll be at 66%, 3 times at 50%. And we'll be zooming in and out as we begin working. And to do that, I'm just holding Control or Command and hitting the plus or minus buttons. So go up to the top and click on this tab where the image is. And what we want to do is we want to move this image over. Now the easiest way to do this is just go over to the Layers panel and single click and hold down onto the layer. And as you begin dragging around, you will see that that layer is now being able to be moved. So I don't know if you can see it. It's really kind of grayed out or transparent, but I've grabbed that layer. Now, if I go up to the document that we're working in and I just keep holding over that tab, I haven't let go of my mouse yet. If I hold over the tab, it'll actually go to that document with my cursor. And then I can come out here in the middle of this document and just let go, and it will actually drop that image into this document. Now you can see it's created a new layer called Layer 2, and it's brought in our image. However, because this image is so much larger than our workspace, it's getting clipped off, and you can see a zoomed in version of what looks like the hand right here. Let's go ahead and just rename this layer. I'm going to double click on it and call this Original. And we don't need layer 1 anymore, so we can just click on that, and then we can hit the trash can, and it'll say, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" We can hit yes, and now we just have this image, the original layer with the image on it. Now, because we're done with the original image, you can leave it open if you would like to. I'm going to just go ahead and close it out. I like to keep a nice clean workspace, so I'm going to hit this exit button next to the tab, and it's going to close it. So now I just have the one tab open with our YouTube thumbnail. And what we want to do is we want to resize this document. So to do that, we need to actually scale down the layer. So whenever you are shrinking or stretching anything, we call that a scale. And to do that, we're going to go up to the top and click on Edit, go down to Transform, and then go to Scale. Go ahead and click on that. So once you do, it doesn't look like anything has changed or anything has happened. Now we have some new options at the top, and you can see that there is a width and a height with a lock icon showing that they're locked together and some percentages. So we could actually scale the image right here by typing in 50% or 25%. However, I want to show you how you can actually manually scale this, and to see that we need to zoom out because this image is so much larger. So I'm going to hit Control or Command and hit the minus sign a couple times until we see the bounding box of that image. Now this is how big the image actually is. If you remember, it's 6,000 pixels across, and our workspace is only 1,280, so this is a much larger image. Well, to scale this down, all we have to do is just click on one of these corners and then drag it in, and it will scale it down for us. And as we do, you can see a tooltip pop up that shows us the new dimensions. So I'm not going to go all the way just yet. I'll go ahead and grab this corner and pull this side in. And then now that we can work with this, I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in. So I'm going to hit Control or Command and the plus key, And now we're into a nice workspace where we can see everything, and we can go ahead and bring this in a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this in until the edges touch. And this looks good. Now you'll notice that it's overshooting at the bottom and at the top just a little bit. And the problem is because this image isn't the same aspect ratio as the 16:9. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a different size than what our workspace is. So the only way that we could compensate for that is if we grab the bottom handle and we brought that in to line it up. We could get the bottom to line up, but as you can see, it gives us a blank space on the left and right hand side, and that's not really what we want, because whenever we export this image, it's going to fill that in with black and our thumbnail is not going to look right. So I would rather at least line up the sides and then move the image up or down based on what I want to see in the image. So for instance, I've got the image at pretty low to the bottom here, and you can see that he's kind of sitting a little lower, the camera's a little lower than the midline, or we can move it up. I can click and drag, and then it'll snap to the center once I see those purple guidelines pop up. So now the camera's right in the center, and this looks pretty good. This is definitely something that we could use, or I can move it to the top where he's a little bit higher than the midline and it's cutting off his hat. We see a little more of the body. It all depends on the image that you're using and some of the white space and negative space and the focal point and so forth. For this particular image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the center, and I don't want the camera perfectly center because just with basic composition, I like to have everything a little bit higher or lower than the center line. So I'm just going to move it up slightly above center so that the camera is not perfectly in the center, but it's just above it, and this looks like a good composition. His hat's getting chopped off a little bit, which isn't too bad because at least the hat's not, touching the borders, and it looks really good here. So once we have that where we want that, you can just go ahead and hit the enter key and it will save that scale. So now we have our image where we want it, and what we want to do is we want to create a duplicate layer and then lock down this original layer. That way, if we ever have any problems, we can come back to that original layer. It's just something that I prefer doing whenever I begin working. So if you go over to the original layer, you can right click, and then you can go up to duplicate layer. And then it's going to ask you for a name. So we're just going to call this man, and then we're going to hit OK. And it has just made a duplicate of that original layer. Both layers are exactly the same. So here's the original layer. If I hide it and show the man layer, they're both the same. So let's go ahead and we'll show the original layer, and we want to lock this down. So go ahead and click on the lock icon for that layer, and you'll see it pop up over here. And now that is locked down, we can't accidentally move it or mess it up. And let's go ahead and hide it too. So to hide and show things, there's a little eyeball in the layers panel. If you click on the eyeball, it will toggle the visibility on and off. So if I turn them both off, we see the transparent background. If I turn on the original, it's there, but we want to hide that. And let's go ahead and turn on visibility for the man layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do all of our editing with the man layer and leave the original alone. And that's just, something that I prefer, because if I ever make a mistake or I get too many edits going on at one time and I can't back out and I need the original, I have it right here for me. So this is a good setup. Let's go ahead and save this out now so that we can always at least start back at this point if, say, the computer crashes. So I'm going to go up to the top, I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go down to Save. Or you can hit Control S or Command S to save that out. And now just go ahead and overwrite the YouTube thumbnail.psd file that we saved out. Now going forward, I'm not going to tell you every time that I save, but I recommend that you just do it, especially if you make any really good edits or as you begin working for any amount of time. Learn that shortcut key, Control S for Windows or Command S for Mac OS, and just constantly be saving that document. Or some people like to save multiple versions. So as you do one set of edits, you might call it YouTube Thumbnail 1, and then you do your next set of edits and you call it YouTube Thumbnail 2, and you make kind of version histories if you need to go back in the time and go to a previous version. But I'm going to be saving as we go throughout this editing process. I'm just not going to tell you every time that I do it, but I do want to make sure that you get into the habit of saving often. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and separate this man out from the background, because we're going to be doing a couple of effects and we want to have him separated out from that background there. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. The main way that we're going to do it is we're going to select him and then we're going to copy and paste him just onto his own layer. So to do that, you can do all kinds of different selection methods. You can use the polygonal lasso tool or the regular lasso tool. If you have a tablet, that might be easier for you. Some people like using the pen tool, and they'll go in and make little tiny points and curves throughout the whole selection. But I'm just going to show you probably one of the easiest ways to do it. It's not as accurate as, say, using the pen tool, but it's definitely a lot faster and easier. So go over to the toolbar and then go to the quick selection tool. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th icon down, and it's going to give us a brush. Now my brush is really tiny at this moment and we want to make it bigger. So we can go up to the brush settings at the top and click on this drop down and change the size. Or a shortcut for that is to use the bracket keys on the keyboard. So by hitting the left and right bracket keys, you can actually make your brush size bigger or smaller. So that's a great shortcut to have, because we can use a big brush and start selecting this big piece of information, and you can see it's finding the differences in pixels and picking up that information for us. Okay, now we need to get a little more fine-tuned because some of this is a little smaller, so we'll go ahead and select a smaller brush, and at this point I'd probably start zooming in and seeing if I can touch this up a little bit. So you can see here where parts of the finger and different parts have not been selected, so we want to go ahead and select that out, and we want to make sure we grab this finger. So grab too much. So if you accidentally select too much, you can hold down the Alt or Option key. Alt for PC and Option for Mac, and it will subtract your selection. Then we let go and we're back to the positive. We will add it back in. So using that Alt or Option key is also very important, because as we go through here, we're going to be subtracting and adding into our section. Okay, it looks like I grabbed too much again, and I might have to bring down my brush a little bit. Just select around this area. If I get a little too much of the background, I'll take it out. And this is just going to be a process of going in and selecting. Now, again, you could use, say, the pen tool if that's easier for you. If you've used it before and you know how to use it, it's definitely something you can do. But I'm just going to go around and see if I can get a fine tune of selection here just by using this tool. And it might take me 5 or 10 minutes. And of course, I would take my time and really try to do the best job that I can, but because I'm trying to teach you and show you quickly, it's gonna be a little sloppier than what I would actually normally do, but I just want to show you the process, so I'm not going to spend too much time getting a perfect selection at this moment. Okay, now we've selected our subject and we want to go ahead and copy and paste this. Before I do that though, I want to go ahead and just smooth this whole selection out just a little bit. If we were to zoom in, let's find maybe a good place where it shows this. Kind of around this arm, you can see that, I don't know if you can tell on your screen, but the lines are a little jagged here. So they kind of create this little jaggedy pattern, and we're going to do some things later on where we want to have this line a little bit smoother than what it is. So we want to go ahead and just smooth out this whole selection. Now, if we were to smooth this, the only problem with that is it automatically shrinks the selection a little bit by the way that it smooths, and in doing so, it can cause some problems that just don't really look that good. So what we need to do is we need to make the selection a little bigger and then smooth it down. So let me show you what I mean. Go up to the top to Select, and then go down to Modify, and then go to Expand. And what this is going to do is it's going to expand our selection. So we can say how many pixels do we want to expand it by. Let's just do 10 just to show you what it does. So there, what it has done, it's made our selection a lot bigger. It's expanded it outward from where it was. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z or Command Z. Go to Select, Modify, and then Expand. And we want to expand it just a little bit. Let's just say 2 pixels. So it's going to overshoot just a little bit, and we're going to pick up a little bit of that background, but that's okay because we're going to smooth this out and it'll automatically bring that back in a little bit for us anyways. So go to Select, now go down to Modify again, and go to Smooth. And what this will do is it's going to try to smooth out the pixels of the selection around this, and it'll just make a nice cleaner line for us than what we have here. And you'll have to kind of play around with this and see the best numbers and see how it works best. Let's go ahead and just start off with 4 and see what it looks like. So we did 4 and it smoothed it a little bit, but it looks like that it kind of rounded this corner off, which was good. Let's try just a little higher number and see what we can get away with here. I'm going to go to Smooth and I'm going to try 8. That's a much smoother line, but it looks like it's not bringing it as much in as I thought it would. Now I want to look at some different areas. I want to look around the hands, and I want to look around, see the camera here. Got a little weird. I might have to reselect some of this selection. The hat actually looks pretty good right there. So we could maybe bring this back in, we could contract it back in, or we could redo this. Let me just go ahead and undo a couple times. I'm going to undo the smooth, and I'm going to undo the expand, and I'm going to expand it just a little bit less. I don't want to expand it that much. So go back to Select, Modify, Expand. Instead of 2 pixels, let's just do 1 pixel. So it just brings it out a little bit, and then go to Select, Modify, Smooth. We'll try the 8 pixels. And that looks pretty good. If it picks up a little bit of the background, that's okay, because we're going to do some blending and some other tricks. That's not a big deal, but we want kind of a smoother line. Now, I need to fix this, and this ain't going to be perfect, but that's okay. So what that has done is it's just kind of made a nice little more curved, smooth line for us. Some of these little small spots, I might hit them one time and just kind of fix them up a little bit if they're big, but if I can get away with it, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Now keep in mind that, you know, as designers, we like to come in here and tweak and tweak and tweak, but most of the general population isn't going to notice that your lines are not perfectly smooth. They're just going to either see the thumbnail or not see the thumbnail and click on it or not click on it. Only another designer or creative person would really care about how perfect your lines are. So you want it to look good, but again, don't stress too much over it, because you don't want to spend too much time on these things that might not matter so much. But we do want to make it look pretty decent from the get-go. Okay, so I think this is a good starting point. I might, you know, like I said, I'd probably spend a little more time cleaning this up, but I want to get moving here so that I can get into the actual editing part for you. So we're going to zoom out, and we have our selection. Now all we want to do is we want to copy and paste this selection into its own layer. To do that, just go up to the top, go to Edit, and then go to Copy. Now this works like typical shortcut keys that you would find in a word processor. Control C or Command C to copy, and then we just want to paste it. So go back to Edit, and then go down to Paste. And that shortcut key is going to be Control V or Command V. When I do that, you see our selection goes away. However, it's added in a new layer for us. And so if we hide the man layer, you can see This is the selection we made. He's all by himself, and this is exactly what we want. Now we can separate him from the background and do some different editing techniques and things like that. So let's go ahead and hide the man layer. However, we want to rename these so that they are a little more accurate. So now we're just going to go ahead and call this man layer the background layer, because it's really going to be the background of this image that we're going to be editing. We're not going to see him because we're going to see him through layer 1. So we're going to call this man. So now what we have here is we have a man layer, and then we have a background layer, but we're going to be editing the man layer over the background. So we'll just call this background. Even though he's still there, that doesn't matter. It'll be covered up. Do, and it's all about being creative and having fun and trying different things. So let's start with the man, and we're going to do something that's pretty popular. We're going to give him an outline, and we do that with what's called a stroke, and this is where the smoothing thing is really going to help out, because if we didn't smooth it, it would be a little more jagged than it will be, but smoothing it out helps it a little bit, and you'll see that in just a moment. So we want to add a layer style, and what's going to happen, let me hide the background here for a minute, is with the layer style, it's going to find pixel information, and then it's going to apply an effect to this layer wherever there is pixel information. Now, wherever it's transparent, that effect will not be applied. So for instance, we're going to give him an outline. So to do that, go down to the bottom and click on this FX button, and it's actually a layer style button, and you can see we have different things we can do. We can do a shadow, we can do a glow, we can do all kinds of different things, but we want to pick stroke. And this is going to create a stroke around the layer. Now you might not be able to see it right now. Let's go ahead and change the color to a bright color so it's easier to see. So we'll pick, say, the blue's easy, but let's do something even more easier like magenta. And you can see that stroke is being applied. Now when I smoothed that layer, it made these lines a little nicer. You'll notice that if you didn't smooth that out, the lines would actually be a little more rigid and rough. So what we can do is we can change the size. So by changing the size, it'll actually change the stroke around him. And see, we can zoom in and zoom out, and you can see how that affects it. So we'll find something that might look a little cool. And the cool thing is that we can always come and adjust this later on if we find out that it's not right. Because we are creating this with a layer style, it's editable, it's non-destructive, which means we can make edits later on and it won't affect anything. Make sure that the position is set to outside. If you have it on inside, it'll actually go to the inside and cover up some of the image. We don't want that. And center is going to find the distance between the inside and outside, which might look okay for your image, but I'm going to use outside for now so that the stroke is completely on the outside. And then the blend mode to normal and opacity to 100%. And then let's go ahead and hit OK, and let's bring back our background layer back in. So now you can see what's happening here. So we'll go ahead and change this stroke. So if I want to make any adjustments, I can go back to the layers panel and double click on that stroke icon there, and it'll bring up the stroke panel, and then I can go ahead and make my adjustments. So if I see something that doesn't look right, or I need to change the color, I can do that. So let's go ahead and give it that stroke. I've got 4 pixels for now, and let's go ahead and give it a white color. We're going to make this one white, and we're going to hit OK. So that looks pretty good. So now you could see that there might be some areas around the clothing that the stroke isn't filling in. It's just because we're seeing a little bit of the background. So that's a little too much. Let's see. So around his sleeve here, there's a little bit of gap between the stroke and his actual sleeve because we selected a little bit of the background. So with the man layer selected, we can actually go to our eraser tool, and we can erase out a little bit of that background, and it will bring this in to his sleeve because remember, it's working on it's a layer style that's working based on the pixel information that we're showing. So some of these parts where I might have grabbed some of the background, I might just come in and touch up real quick. And all I'm doing is I'm using the eraser brush to erase out some of the pixels, and the stroke is moving with it because it's a style that's being applied. Now I am doing this with a mouse, so it's a little tricky. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I want to keep doing the effect to show you, but of course I would come in here and touch this up a little bit. So that's one way that you can come in and fix any areas that you see that might not look really good. But this is a good start. So what that stroke has done is it has added a little bit more separation to the background. Now this is going to look a little more stylized as we go on. It looks kind of cheesy right now, but you'll see the finished product. It looks pretty nice. And what it's doing is it's just separating him out. This is a common technique that we see in a lot of YouTube thumbnails, and use it all the time because it helps just make the image pop a little more and draw your attention, because you're drawn to this great picture, but then you're drawn to this stroke that's really pointing this guy out, and it'll match the text that we have and so forth. So you'll see the final product, but let's go ahead and move along. So next what we're going to do is we're going to edit the background. So the background looks great. It's out of focus and this is a great image. We could probably just go ahead and slap some text right on here. However, I want to do some other things that's just going to make it a little more stylized or maybe branded if you want to use some certain colors. So go ahead and click on that background layer. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to start adjusting the background and changing things like its color and doing things of that nature. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add an adjustment layer. Now the adjustment layer works just like the layer style. However, it's just going to affect the whole layer and adjust it as if you were using any of the image adjustments at the top. So if you go to image adjustments and you see things like brightness levels, contrast, hue and saturation, and so forth, that lets you edit the layer. And I can do that with a layer adjustment, but the great thing about the layer adjustment is that it's non-destructive. So I can apply the layer adjustment and change some of those settings, and then later on if I need to make any changes, I can do that automatically. So go ahead and click on the layer adjustment button at the bottom, and then you'll see some of those different settings here. So all the different things that we can create. So the first one that we're going to add in is we're going to add in this one called black and white. So go ahead and punch that in, and it's going to turn the background black and white. Now remember, we're not working on the man layer, we're working on the background layer. We stuck a black and white adjustment layer that is affecting anything that's below it. So right now, what's below it is the background and the original layer. So it's actually affecting both of those. If I turn off background and show original, it's affecting that one too. If this black and white adjustment layer was above the man layer, it would be affecting it also. And that's not what we want. We want to go ahead and click and drag and make sure that it is below the man layer and above the background layer, so it's only affecting what's beneath it. Now, this allows us to go and change the values, the brightness and darkness areas of different colors. So for instance, if I want to make the reds brighter or darker in the image, you can see them changing in the background as I move the slider around. This uses a lot of blues, so we'll take the cyan, and as we adjust this, you can see the image change. So we can make areas brighter or darker based on their colors. We're going to come back to this in just a moment, and the next thing that we're going to do is add another adjustment layer. So we're going to add in what's called a gradient map. And what the gradient map does is it allows us to assign a gradient to different values. So wherever there are dark parts of the image, like these cans or this wall in the background, we can give it one color. And wherever there are lighter elements, like this white board or wall that's going on here, we can give it a brighter color. And by doing so, it allows us to have this really cool stylized effect that we often see nowadays. And it's pretty common, but it looks really great. So go down to Adjustment Layers, click on that, and then go to Gradient Map and select that. Now, nothing has really changed because we're using a black and white gradient map, and it's treating it just like the black and white adjustment layer that we have here. So let's change that out to some colors. Go ahead and click on that gradient map, And then you can select any one of these colors. Now I have some pre-made that I made before, and you can see that there's some that Photoshop loads with. If you click on this little gear icon, you can actually bring in different gradient maps. So for instance, if I want to bring in pastels, I can click on that and it'll say, do we want to replace them or append them? If we append them, it will just add them in. So let's go ahead and click append, and it will add those colors in here. Well, let's go ahead and select one, and I will show you what's happening. So we're going to select this red and blue one. And what is going on is everything that is darker in the image, like the wall that we looked at or those cans, is receiving this red color on the left-hand side. And everything that is brighter is receiving the blue, like that white wall that we had there. And then all the values in between are getting a nice blend of this gradient. So we can scroll through these gradients and see some of the different effects that they have. And you can, this one actually uses 3 colors. So the darks are getting blues, the brights are getting yellows, and the midtones are getting more of a red color. So you can come in here and you can do a bunch of really cool different effects by using these different maps. So go ahead and select one. I'm going to go ahead and select this red to blue, or if you want to create your own, you can click on the little color icon here, click on the color swatch, and then what we can do is we can try to manipulate this a little bit. So you might be on hue and saturation, and you can change that around. We'll leave it on red. I'm going to click on the brightness, and I'm going to make it a little darker. So I want it to still kind of be a dark color. Since it's the dark values that we're picking up, if we use a bright color, it really washes out the image like this. We don't want that. So we want to pick maybe like a dark color. I think that looks kind of cool. Hit OK. And then we can go to the blue color. And we can adjust that a little bit. Now if we bring it down, it's going to bring down all the light values. And we can just kind of move around. I'm actually looking at his jacket right here and seeing if I can maybe find something that would work kind of similar to the colors in the image. And that's one thing that I will do as a designer, is I'll try to pull in colors that are already being used and see how they work. So let's go back to the red. Maybe it's a little too dark. Let's brighten that up a little bit. Okay, so when we have something that we like, we can go ahead and hit the OK button and it'll save that out. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the black and white adjustment layer. And remember, this is changing the values. So wherever there was red, we can make it brighter or darker. And wherever there's yellows, we can make them brighter or darker. So by going in and manipulating this, because we're using this gradient map, you can make parts of the image come in or out based on their value and the gradient map that's being used. So there's not a lot of yellows, not a whole lot of greens. Now we know there's a lot of cyans and blues, so we can really brighten up this image or really darken it up based on how much of the cyans we want to add or subtract in this image. So there's a little bit of dark blues, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot of magentas. So you can come in and manipulate those and definitely have a little more fine control of your actual image. Kind of a stylized look going on. Let's go ahead and add in some text so we can start seeing how this can come together. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the top layer, the man layer, and then I'm going to add in my text, which will put it above everything else. So go over to your text tool. And then go ahead and let's select a color. We can just leave it black for now and just click out somewhere in the document, and we are going to write our text. So this is going to be called 21 camera tricks. Maybe this is a video on different camera tricks that you can create. And now we can edit this text. So it's a little small right now. So if I double click inside of the text, or actually triple click, it'll highlight everything for me. And I can go ahead and make that size bigger. So we can make it 21. I'll hit the move tool in the toolbar and then just bring this out to where I can see it. And then the black is really not that well read. So let's go down and click on the text tool again. We'll triple click inside the text and let's change the color. So you can pick any color you want. Let's try white. So white's a little better, but still kind of hard to stand out. So we're gonna change that later on. I'll show you how to do a little trick to help that out. But for now, let's go ahead and change the actual font. So you'll probably want to pick some different fonts than what's preloaded. So I'm going to pick that text type tool and I'm going to triple click in here, and you can pick a font that you want by going to this option at the top and then selecting one of the fonts. So here I have all the fonts that are loaded up inside of my computer. But if you're not finding the font that you would really like, the great thing about having an Adobe CC subscription is that you can use Typekit, and Typekit gives you access to all kinds of really cool fonts. So to do that, let's go ahead and hit the Move tool so we get out of there, and then go up to the top and click on Type, and then go to Add Fonts from Typekit and select that. Once Typekit loads, you can go ahead and start searching for the font you want. So this is a great little application that you get with a Creative Cloud subscription. You can see that you can search by all fonts, sans serif fonts, serif, script, black letter, mono, handwritten, decorative, and then you can search by fonts that are good for paragraphs, fonts that are good for headings. You can search or you can apply different properties such as the weight, the width, height, contrast, and so on. And you can even type in your sample text. So it automatically brought this in for me, but you can type in what you're trying to say and see how that looks. So if we want to see, like, say the Century Gothic looks really good and we want to use this, but we want it to be nice and bold. Thumbnail images we want to stand out, and so we want to use bold text that really pops. If you use a really thin font, it's really hard to see, especially on small devices. So go down to the weight and click on the very bold weight here. And it looks like it made it, showed it with bold, but got rid of our Century Gothic font here. Let's go ahead and see if we can search for it again. So I'm going to go to the search bar and I'm going to type in Century Gothic. There it is. I'm going to click on that. And when I do, it actually brings me to the font itself, where I can go in and see how these look. So I can see what it looks like with bold italics, with italics, or with regular. Let's say I don't want this font. I can just back up and I can go and find the font that I want. Now for the YouTube thumbnail, I don't want serif fonts that have these little endings at the end, the serifs at the end. I want something that is nice and easy to read, so I'm going to use a sans serif font. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sans serif. And let's go ahead and select a font that's good for headings, because that'll give us a better selection of fonts that are specifically good for being read. So you can see some different ones in here, and you can go ahead and activate whatever font that you want to use. So go ahead and pick out one that you like. When you're ready to use that font, you can go ahead to activate fonts and click on this little icon here. It's going to say font activation successful. It's going to give you some information. Go ahead and hit OK. And what it has done is it has activated that font. So this is called Mr. Ease XL. This was not in my library just a minute ago while we were working. So let's go back over to Photoshop. And now let's go ahead and change this to that font. So I'm going to pick the type tool, triple click on 21 camera tricks or text. I'm going to click up here in the box and it's going to highlight it for me. And now I can actually search for that font. So I think it was called Mr. Ease. And here are all the Mr. Ease fonts loaded up for you. So Typekit is really awesome because it's a great place to search for fonts. So I'm not sure exactly which one it is that we wanted and I can't see the text. So let's grab the Move tool. Let's just move this down and grab the Type tool. And as I hover over these, you can see it change. So we can find one that looks really good. Okay, I think I like the Mod OT Heavy. So I'm going to select that. And I think that's going to look pretty good. So now we can go ahead and add in our text. We're going to have another piece of text in here. So we can add that in now or we can add it in later. I'll go ahead and put it in. So let's go ahead and grab that type tool. And we're going to click out here. And we're going to type in 4 perfect photos. So 21 camera tricks for perfect photos. Now this font, I want to actually be a different font than what I would use for my 21 camera tricks. It's nice to use 2 different fonts. Typically you don't want to go over 2 or 3 fonts, but if you want to use 2 different fonts, it can look really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, and you can go back into Typekit and pick a font. I'm going to go ahead and use one that I already use often. It's called Voltage. So I'm going to click up here. I'm going to type in Voltage. There it is, Voltage Regular. And it's this kind of script handwritten font. Now I know it's a little hard to see. I'll bring it up here in this dark area so you can see it, but it's a nice little handwritten script font. So now what we can do is we can start trying to place our text around this image and seeing what works. So we have this nice white space on the left hand side, and so this is probably where we're going to put our text. So we just want to find out the best placement for this, and we can use compositional theory to place these things. We can use line of sight or whatever we want. I kind of like this open space down here, so we'll maybe start here, and let's make this a little bigger. So this is 60. Let's go ahead and bump this up to 72. Okay, so that's a good start. Let's go back to our 21 camera tricks. Over in the layers panel, it created 2 type layers for us, 21 camera tricks and 4 perfect photos. Just because my mind works the way that I see things written, I'm going to drag 21 camera tricks up and put that above 4 perfect photos. Now this is too small also. So let's go ahead and change the size here. Okay, that's still too small, so you can type in any number you want. So I can go in and double this, but 144. Now this is looking a lot better. We want nice big text like this that's easy to read. You've got to remember that this is going to be looked at on not only computers, but smartphones and tablets, and it has to be legible at a smaller size. So what I like to do is, as I'm working, is I will go ahead and zoom out a couple times and see how this looks at, say, 25%, where this is actually probably closer to an actual thumbnail on YouTube. Is that text more legible? Now, it's really competing with the background, and we're going to go ahead and fix that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and get this type where we want it, and then we'll fix it so we can read it a little better. I'll show you a little trick for that, and then also we can do some more adjusting. But I like to zoom out, zoom in. Sometimes I'll go real far out. I can still read the main title there. 4 perfect photos is getting a little hard to see, but not too bad. So you want to do that every now and then to make sure that what you're creating is legible. So I like this. Let's go ahead and move tricks down to the next line. So I'm going to hit enter. Oops. Okay, I have a huge spacing thing going on here. It's probably part of my characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all this, and I'm going to open up the character panel. If you don't have it, go to Window and click on Character. I have it over here, so I'm going to select that. Oh, wrong one. And yeah, this I have a spacing. Which one is this called? I always forget the names of these, but this is the spacing from line to line, line spacing, I guess you'd call it. It's at 400 points. So we could just type something in here. I could just put in 100 and see how that looks, or you can click and drag that icon and it'll automatically move it for you. So this is really cool. This is a nice way to do this. So I can go ahead and click my move tool and then see how this looks. This isn't a bad start. So I think I might actually would like to put tricks a little bigger because I want that text to stand out. By using hierarchy, what we can do is we can make tricks really pop the most, so it draws a person in, then they can read 21 camera tricks and then 4 perfect photos, and hopefully that sells them enough to want to click on this. So there's a couple different ways that we can do this. The easiest way for me, I feel like, is to go ahead and click that type tool, and let's just go ahead and erase this. And we're going to go to 21 camera tricks and make a duplicate. So I can click on that. I can right click and go to duplicate layer, or I can click and drag it to the new layer icon and it will make a duplicate for me. Let's go ahead and grab the move tool and move that out of there so we can see it, and grab that type tool. Now the reason why I duplicate it instead of making it from scratch is it'll save the same information of the font, so the font family and the heavy weight and the 144 count. So that just makes it a little easier. We'll call this tricks. So I'll go ahead and grab the move tool, and you'll see it renames that for us in the layers panel. And now we can move this independently of the 21 camera. So 21 camera tricks, but we want to make this big. And what I like to do is I like to have this left side meet up with the right side of this top phrase. So let's go ahead and make the size of this bigger. So what I can do is I can keep punching in the number that I think it would be, or I can go to the size icon and you see my cursor changes to double arrows, and I can click and drag to make that bigger. I can also do that in the character panel, so that's a little easier for me to see. So I like to use this character panel, and I'm going to drag that over until they're both lining up together. Now let's go ahead and move that down, and what happens is it makes it nice and big for us. I just want to make it a touch bigger. And you can have fun with this and do whatever you would like. But what this is doing is it's really allowing me to have tricks be the main word that people will see as they're scrolling through, and then hopefully they'll stop and read the rest of the phrasing. So I'm going to grab the tricks layer and drop that below the 21 camera layer. Now I want to group these two together because I want to keep moving them together, not independently. So I'm going to select 21 camera, and I'm going to hold the shift key and select tricks, and I'm going to group these into a group so I can move them together. So I can go up to the top to layer, and then go down to group layers. I can use the shortcut key Control G or Command G also to group these. It's going to put those in a group, so let's go ahead and name these. Oh, I have caps lock on. So we'll call that main heading. And when I open up the folder there, you can see both of those are there together. If I hide the group, it'll hide both of them for me. I can collapse a folder, and then if I grab my move tool, I can actually move these independently. Now you'll notice when I grabbed it, it just moved this one layer, and that's not what I want. And that's because at the top for the move tool, layer is selected as the move method. So if you click on that drop down menu and you go to group, it'll actually grab them as the group that they are. So if you want to move them separately, you can change this to layer and move that one separately. Or if you want to move them together, change it to group, and then we can move this as one group. So this is starting to come together, but obviously it doesn't look great. We still have a couple problems. The text doesn't look good running into him, and it's a little hard to see with the background because these values are competing with each other. We actually need some darker values. If I bring it up to the top where this red dark area is, it's a little easier to see, or even over his clothes, it's easier to see. But out here in the center, because there's higher values where this blue is, it's making it kind of difficult. We're going to do a little trick. We're just going to use a gradient to darken this side of the image, and we're going to fade that over into the right side of the image, and it'll just make this text pop a little more. Let's go ahead and close that character panel. I'm going to go ahead and save real quick. And I just want to create a basic gradient layer that's going to be underneath this, but above the background, because if it's behind the background, we won't see it. And if it's above the text, it'll cover everything up. So click on the background layer, and whenever we create a new layer, it will add it above the background layer, and it'll actually be underneath everything else. So go down to your adjustment layer options, and then go to gradient. That creates a gradient for us, and it's already starting out looking pretty good. However, one issue that we're having is the gradient map and the black and white adjustment layers are affecting everything beneath it, and this isn't where we want to have this gradient fill because it's getting that red color from the gradient map. Let's just go ahead and hit OK for now to save this gradient out, but we're going to click and drag that above these two adjustment layers. So I put it above the gradient map and the black and white map so that it's not affecting that gradient fill. Now we can click on the gradient fill, and if we double click on that gradient, it'll bring our gradient fill options back up, and we can adjust this any way we want. So for instance, if we change the scale, it's actually going to make our gradients bigger or smaller. So as we bring this down, you can see it gets a little bigger, and as we bring it up, it scales it out. Let's make that 100. Oops. We can change the angle, and this is really what I want to do. I want to change the angle so that the gradient is coming from this side. So it's pointing in this direction. So it starts black over here, and then it falls off into the image. So if you look at the gradient at the top, you can see what's happening. It's going from black to transparent, not black to white, but black to transparent. So we have black on the left-hand side, and we have the transparency on the right, so we're seeing the image, and now you can see that text is really starting to pop a lot more and a lot easier, and it's giving this cool kind of stylized feel. I'm going to go ahead and just make that angle 0. And I'm going to manipulate the gradient a little bit. So click on the gradient, it'll bring up the gradient editor, and at the bottom is the colors. You saw that before when we changed the gradient map, but at the top is the transparency. Now we can click and drag these around, and as I drag the transparency of the black channel over a little bit, you'll see it actually fills in on the image a little bit too. And that's kind of what I want. I want to have a nice black border on this side to where we can see that a little bit better. Now I could go completely black, or that's probably a little too much, so I'm going to back that off a little bit. And I just want to make sure that it's enough to where I see some of this background, but we have this nice dark black border where that's making this text pop a lot more for us. Now text looks like it's still a little big. We might have to bring the text size down a little bit, but those are things that we can edit and add as we go along. So go ahead and hit the OK button. Hit OK here, and now that text is becoming easier to see, and we still have this cool stylized effect in the background that looks nice. So another thing that I notice is the text is above the man, and that isn't really working out real well for us either. We don't want that. We want it to go behind him because it's going to make a kind of cool effect if we do that. So go to this main heading group, select it, and then let's drag that underneath the man but above everything else, such as the background and the gradient. And what it does is it puts the text behind him but over everything else. And that looks really cool. Only you can't read it real well, so I think our sizing is a little off. We probably need to make this a little bit smaller. So let's go into that main heading, click on 21 camera, click your type tool, we'll select that. I'll just go up to the size, and I'll click on the icon, and I'll drag it down. And what I want to do is I do want it to go behind him because I think that's kind of a cool feature. And if you see this, you can pretty much make out what this says. That's not too hard to see because you can put together that says camera, even though that A is covered up. But I like how it does that. It gives it kind of a three-dimensional feel. So let's go down to tricks, and we need to adjust this. And this might take a little bit of playing back and forth, getting the right size, but that's all part of the fun. Now, if I don't line it up perfectly with the A, that's okay. But it looks like I need to probably come in a little bit more. And we're just going to go back and forth here for a moment. And you don't have to highlight it every time if you don't want to. Let's see. It's actually smart enough to know I want to move this up. So I can click and drag, and again we have group turned on, so let's change that to layer. We can click and drag this, or you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So for fine tuning, I'll use my arrow keys and I'll pick those up together. Let's change that back to group, and let's move that over a little bit. And what I want is our center line is right here, but again, I don't like it perfectly center. I like to have it above the center line just a little bit because it catches the eye a little bit better. So I might hide a little bit of the text. I'm looking at his knuckle right here where the S is. I don't like both ends of the S getting covered up, but if one end of the S is sticking out and then this piece is in, that's okay with me. So that looks pretty cool. So let's go ahead and grab for perfect photos. We'll move that down. We could even stick it in there with the text once we get it all into one group, but I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Oh, it looks like I actually did put it in there. I didn't mean to do that. Let's pull it out of the group. We don't want it in the group. We want it separate right now. Later on, you can add it in if you want. And then now, this text, we want it lined up on the left, and we can probably make it a little bigger too. So let's just make this a little larger. And that looks pretty good. Maybe we center this. Let's see how this looks. And a lot of the creative process is just kind of moving around the workspace and the white space of your design and just kind of seeing what fits. So that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to center justify this, bring it over, and then when I make it bigger, it'll do it from the center. Okay, I think that looks pretty cool. The only other thing you could do with the text if you wanted to is you could change the colors of these. I like the big white bold. Again, if we zoom out and look at this at 25%, you can still read that. So if someone was scrolling on YouTube, they could take a look at this and it would actually be pretty legible. It looks actually a little high now that I zoom out. So I might take my tool here and I'm going to use my arrow keys and just bump that down a little bit and just see how that looks. Yeah, I think it was a little too high. I think that looks good. So that's one of the important things about zooming out. I can still read this even at 12.5%. That's a very small image, but it's still very legible. So that's something you'll definitely want to do. But I kind of like how this is going. I like how it's following the contours of the hand here. It's kind of blending in a little bit, and this is easy to see. You can mess around with the different colors and see what looks good. For instance, I might change out the for perfect photos to a different color. Maybe I color pick his shirt, or maybe that blue in the background. So that blue works good because it's part of the background. Maybe make it as bright as possible so it really pops, and hit OK. And that just gives another little extra style. So we have two different colors for the two different texts and two different fonts. And this is starting to come together. Let's go ahead and save. And we'll zoom out again. And you know, for perfect photos is a little hard to see, but that's like the second heading. It's not the main heading, so that's okay. So this is starting to look good. I really like the way that this has turned out. The thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a glow outside of the stroke. So the stroke is cool, but I also want to give it a little bit of a glow too, because I think it'll look pretty neat. So let's go back to the man, and we're going to add in another layer style. So go down to the effects button, click on that, and go to outer glow. And this is going to add an outer glow for us. Now we can pick a color, so let's just start with white. And you can see it's glowing way too much. So you'll want to manipulate things. There's the opacity. I'll usually turn it to 100% until I kind of get the spread and size where I want to. So you can adjust the size and bring that down, and the spread. Now because our stroke is white and the glow is white, you can't see what's going on. So let's change this to a very awkward color. So you can see that we can have this cool stroke, and then we can have this other glow outside of it. So if we do the spread, it's going to make it bigger, kind of like a stroke for us. If we do the size, it'll blow that out. And then if we turn the opacity down, it'll have a nice little cool glow around them. You might be on normal mode. Let me show you that. So there's different blending modes. This is for normal mode, but I like to brighten it up, so I use the screen mode whenever I'm creating this. It just kind of mixes with the background and brightens that up a little bit. Let's go ahead and change the color to a color we might use. Like, let's pick this blue again because that was kind of cool. We'll make it that bright color. Maybe even bring it down a little more so it's a little brighter, but stay in that same area. And we will just kind of go around and play around. We don't want it to be overpowering, so we want it to look good. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so this is where I ended up. 30% opacity, 18% spread, 54 pixels for the size. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and just kind of see how that looks. And it just gives this little glow feature outside of the stroke around him. That stroke might be a little too thick. Now, if we want to make any adjustments, the great thing is we can always click on any of these non-destructive elements inside of the layers panel and fix those. So let's say the stroke is too big. I don't like how thick that is. I can double click on stroke and we can go in and change it. So now we can try 3 pixels or maybe even 2 pixels. I think 2 is a little small. It starts looking pretty jaggedy. So we'll do 3 pixels and we'll hit OK. And that looks better. If you don't like the glow, you can go in and double click on the outer glow and you can go ahead and make those changes. Or let's say that we don't like the background the way that it's looking and we want to change the gradient map. Well, we can double click on the gradient map, pull up that original gradient, and now maybe we can adjust the colors and see how it looks now that we have the completed image. We can try some different colors, like maybe this brighter reds. And that's a great thing about using the layer styles and the adjustment layers, is that you can do all of these things in a non-destructive manner so that you can go in and edit them later on. You can also do this with filters too. You can use smart filters, which will let you create a filter non-destructively. So I'm going to just go ahead and hide this all for a moment. And here's our original background layer. Let's go ahead and make a duplicate of that. And we're going to call this background blur because we're actually going to blur it out a little bit. And if we go up to the top and we click on filter, you can see that we have some blur options here. So here we have the Gaussian blur is a very popular one. So let's go ahead and click on that. And it's going to, this is a lot, so let's bring that down. And you can see 0 is not blurred, and as we brighten that up, bring that up, it gets more blurry. Now this is really great because we created it on a new layer. So if we hit OK, we can go through and we can make our edits. But again, we can't change that later on. So to get around that, what we can do is we can use a smart filter so that we can make those edits later on if we need to. So let's go ahead and just delete that. We'll go to our background layer, go up to the top, click on filter, and then convert for smart filters. You want to click on that. It's going to say to enable re-editable smart filters, the selected layer will be converted into a smart object. Hit OK, that's fine. It's turned that layer into a smart object layer. Let's go ahead and rename it. And then now let's go and add our filter in. So we're going to go to blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll just start off with 3.9, that's fine. And now you can see that the layer changes. It actually looks like one of these other layers. So we have a smart filter with a Gaussian blur. So as we go in and we bring in all the different edits and make edits to our document that we've created, if we decide, okay, the background is not blurry enough or it's too blurry and we want to change that, now since we set up a smart filter, we can double click on that Gaussian blur. And if you watch this background area here, you can see that we can actually blur that out. So depending on how much or how little you want to do that. I blur it out a little bit, just if it's too sharp and I really want to bring everything in focus, you can give it just a little tiny blur and that'll just help do that. Now this image already had some natural focusing blur inside of it, so I don't want to get too crazy with it. I want to leave it a little sharp, but sometimes I'll go in and just blur it out and it just makes everything in the foreground pop a little more. But that's another way that you can use non-destructive layers inside of Photoshop. So that looks really good for our thumbnail. We're finished, we're ready to go, and now we can go ahead and save this out. So I'm going to first save it, go to File, Save. That saves my YouTube thumbnail.psd file. And now I'm going to go down to File, and I can go to Save As or Export. If we go to Export, we have a quick export option. We have Export As, and then we have Save for Web Legacy. Let's go ahead and click on Export As. And this is going to give us information about our document. So here we can see it's 1280 by 720. Even the PNG file is underneath 1 megabyte. So we could save this out as a PNG file, but let's go ahead and change that to the JPG file since we said that's what we were going to do. The JPG file compresses the image and it takes it down to 430 kilobytes, so half of a megabyte. So we've reduced the file size in half just by using a compressed JPG file format. It'll make it a lot easier for us to add this into YouTube and easier for YouTube to load that up for us. So we just want to make sure we have everything set to 100% quality, our width and height 1280 by 720. All this looks good. Go ahead and hit Export All. And then it automatically gives it the name YouTube thumbnail.jpg. We'll hit save. And now we have our saved PSD file that we can edit later on, but we also have our saved YouTube thumbnail that we can edit. So let's go ahead and pull that up in Windows Explorer and take a look at it. And here is our final image. This is the image that we could actually go ahead and upload to YouTube. This is the YouTube thumbnail.jpg file. It's less than a megabyte. It's a JPG file. It's in the right resolution and aspect ratio, and it looks really good. It looks great. You can read it as you zoom out. And so hopefully this gives you not only an idea about how to create this YouTube thumbnail, but how you can create your own. And I've given you some different tips and tricks and ideas for creating thumbnails, not only for YouTube, but any other social media platform in the future. So I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing what you come up with.